it's interesting because I'm like a walking wounded. The best term I've got is shell shock. Mm-hmm. So I'm a primary victim in all this, but I'm the one going around being, the pastor's wife to the whole congregation. How are you coping? Let me help you understand this, I'm giving, the wisdom that the elders should have. I'm training them to see and recognise what's in front of their eyes. I know the first time when I put out a white flag, I said to my husband, I will no longer keep your secrets. The next time you do something like that, someone else will know. That was it.
Well, welcome to the Liminal Living Podcast, and I am Dr. Tom Rundell, the curator of conversations around here, and today I have a wonderful, beautiful, tragic story. I met Kate online. She is going to remain anonymous for her protection. She has gone through some abuse through her husband / pastor / church and community, and as tragic and difficult as her story is to hear, the redemption on the other side that she has worked so very hard is just as beautiful as it is tragic. And there were times in this conversation where I was just silent because I didn't know what to say. There was times where I kind of welled up in tears and I was quiet. So I'm editing out some of the quiet, but it is just such an interesting conversation. Kate is from Australia, and she is part of a kind of a charismatic prayer ministry there that is, I don't know how to describe it, but she does a very good description of it. And I'm just going to set you loose on my conversation with Kate. I think any kind of descriptions or intros I can give is just holding you back from what this awesome conversation is. So I'm just going to let you loose. And here's my beautiful conversation with Kate. Oh, well, Kate, I want to welcome you to the Liminal Living Podcast. And you are waking up bright and early in the morning to talk to me because you are all the way in Australia, which is not only the other side of the world, and it's an entirely different season where you're heading into your spring and summer seasons, where we're heading into winter, and we have fall and winter, but it's even a different day. This is Wednesday at 5 o'clock for me, but it's Thursday morning at 8 o'clock a.m. for you. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's a really stark difference way over there. So We were just talking, and you had some Breckie, which is Australian for breakfast, which I just learned.
Yeah.
What'd you have for your Breckie?
A Cuppa, which is a cup of tea, and muesli and yogurt and strawberries.
Oh, that sounds really good. And a Cuppa. I have me a really big cup of coffee in the morning. So would that be a bola? Like a big bowl of coffee?
A mug.
A mug. Okay.
Yeah.
See, there's things in Australia that I've never actually talked to anyone from Australia. So this is fun for me on many different fronts. But Kate, I met you on Facebook through a pseudonym that shall remain nameless. And I started following some of the things that you were posting there, talking about spiritual abuse and some different things that just really captured my attention. I started to follow your posts, and then one day I dropped you a line and said, would you be willing to talk about some things on this podcast? And it's been a long time coming because it's really hard to get schedules to line up from Australia all the way here to Michigan in America, but we made it.
We made it. The focus has been on education around recognizing spiritual abuse. It's been such an invisible force in my life.
Yeah, I was actually just talking with a friend on text and kind of telling her that I was about to have a conversation like this. And I said, a little bit of your interactions with abusive pastors, and her response was, an abusive pastor, that must be pretty unusual. And I thought to myself,
excuse my laughter.
it's so very common. And I said that it's so very common. And she said she didn't have any idea about that. So I pointed her over to the Julie Roys report.
Yeah, that's a tragedy. It's called an inoculation. So when you have a first experience of pastors that are held in such high esteem, of not being who they say they are, it really is a shock to the system, and it's called an inoculation. Hopefully it's someone you hear about at arm's length and not directly involved in, and it just begins to open your eyes to, oh, there's another reality I have to come to grips with, and that prepares you for when it comes close to home, and you're less likely to go from shock to denial, but more likely to see the reality of it. Yeah.
And now that I do want to get into your story, but I was wondering how much of your background you feel safe talking about, kind of the introducing us to who you are and the soil you grew out of. But I also want to respect your anonymity, and we can find out why later. But how much would you like to share about the soil that you came out of?
A very strong evangelical denomination here, proudly, I would say now patriarchal, but they say complementarian. But grew up in that soil and married a Christian man who I knew was heading into the ministry. And I think within a couple of years had my first child, ended up having 5 children. But every couple of years hitting a low point, kind of breakdown. And the context is I'm actually living with a pastor who is a narcissist and sabotaging the marriage, but I'm not aware of that. I'm just trying to live my best Christian life, and it's...
Now, is the pastor that you're living, the pastor is your husband. He's a narcissist.
Yes.
Are you able to see what's going on? Are you in denial?
No, see, I'm totally a frog in a pot. And I totally am unaware of the full reality, and I'm just trying to live the Christian life, which is going through many cycles of forgiveness and trying again and trying things differently. And but looking back, I could see I'd hit a rock bottom, and for a few days, and then pull myself out again. And after a few cycles, which takes a decade or two, I realized he's the one that's making me sick. Yeah.
So you kept tanking and getting hit with you call them low things. Were they like bouts of depression or bouts of sickness, or a mixture of both of them?
Well, you just realize life's not working. Every time you try and have a voice, he counters the voice with Bible language. And every time you try and make it work, I think one low point was I realized this marriage is what it is and it's not going to change. What do I want to do with my life? And it set me on a path of my education. So after I had 5 children, I began my undergraduate degree and got qualified in teaching. but for me, it is a big thing to do. But for me, it was survival. That was my survival thing. That or go down into, what is it? Over here we call it St. John of God, where you get hospitalised.
Oh.
I wasn't at that point, but I watched other friends go to that point. So yeah, my education was my survival strategy.
Now, how long into the marriage until you realize this is a problem that is recurring and it's not my fault?
Well, it's interesting because the head of the denomination would get all the clergy wives together and say, if you've got any of these notes about your husband, don't ruminate over them, just burn them, that's part of forgiveness. But it was picking up some of these notes that I had made was a real light bulb moment where I realised this is the same problem I had last month, last year, last 5 years ago, and it helped me start to recognise patterns. In about 2004, I hit a low point, and I got to go to a 3-day retreat, a prayer ministry retreat. And I'd given up all the arguments that the denomination teaches you to make you not go there. And I was like, goodness me, they're not asking for blood. They're not asking for money. They're not giving me drugs. I was like, I'll just do anything. I like repent, forgive, renounce. And they looked at me and go, oh, you're very good, participant. And I just did everything. And once, I think I had this blinding flash in my brain thinking a car had reflected the lights of the sun. But when I lifted my head, there is no cars, no roads. And they looked at me and said, you look different. And when they finished, I went to the bathroom to look in the mirror, and my face was serene, was so peaceful and serene. And before I went to this retreat, I wasn't laughing. My daughter took a photo of me and I looked just dreadful. I was shuffling. I was reaching for a little bit of alcohol every night. I couldn't sleep. But after this kind of prayer turnaround, I heard myself laughing over lunch, running across the grass. My change in alcohol, my taste in alcohol changed straight away, and I never was reaching for it again. And my sleep, I used to ask my husband to rest his hand across my forehead just to get some peace so I could sleep. But when I went back, I'm like, oh, I don't need that. What you doing that for? So it's like a real turnaround kind of jump-started my healing.
Oh, so that was point. Like in a moment of prayer, you saw a flash of light that you thought was a car, but it was something happened in you?
Yes, I don't have very many miracles, but I think it was the Holy Spirit working to, jumpstart my healing. Yeah.
Well, you have the kind of the evidence on the other side of that moment of having an entirely changed demeanor. That jump start of your healing. That was in 2004. And how long was that prayer retreat? How many days did you stay there?
That was a 3-day retreat, and I would go back every year. I grabbed all the teachings. I would listen to them. I couldn't tell you what I'd gone through, but it was rebuilding myself, my soul, my brain from again. I was losing myself. I would listen to the teachings, and, the first month or two, I couldn't tell you what I'd just learned, but I was soaking it in. The next month or two, I could tell you what I listened to. And then after that, the next month or two, I could go, oh, I understand how they're arguing from those verses to this healing. But I was soaking it in, and I would it was the days of Walkmans and CDs.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
I would buy the Bible on CD. I would buy classical hymns on CD and the teachings on CD. And so I'd have that in my pocket and on my earphones and soaking that in to strengthen me. Some of the teachings that were really good was The Father Heart of God. Ken Symington has some really good. He's a beautiful, gentle voice talking very gently about the Father Heart of God and identity in Christ. So all of these things were putting positive truth back into my soul.
When you came home in 2004 from the first one, what did you then, was that the time where you were starting to notice what the problem was?
Well, what it did is it fixed whatever the dysfunctional patterns were in me. And so I didn't recognize that I was in a dysfunctional, abusive marriage. But what it meant was that I was no longer playing the game. And I remember a few years later, my ex-pastor husband coming in one evening and almost like picking a fight, because to pick a fight is his excuse to leave the house. Mm-hmm. And I just remember kind of chuckling, like, how ludicrous is this? But the very act that I'm chuckling at this and not reacting to it is a sign that I'm no longer dancing the dance. And I think being in that place, if I hadn't gone through that journey to release my own little triggers, I don't think I would have finally made that final step when the truth came out in 2008. Yeah.
Now, when you stopped playing the game, was there a difference in him that you saw, that he noticed a difference in you, or did he keep doing what he was doing?
Oh, he's very stuck in his ways, and nothing. A narcissist just gets more and more practiced and more toxic. So with every decade, it just got worse. And they keep going wherever they can get away with it. But all I would do is hold myself in neutral. So you learn to be, what I now understand is grey rock. I didn't understand it there, but you learn not to be angry, not to be upset, just to be quiet, just to be polite, because they're always looking to make you the blame or the shame on you. So you learn not to react. Yeah.
Now, that was in 2004, and then you started to go back every year to these retreats.
Every year I went to another teaching or another seminar, and yeah, I was like addicted because this changed me. I'm like, I'm going to have more of that.
Did you have support from your husband, or did he think it was silly?
No. Oh, he took me there. He knew there, but he was just tolerating it. In our denomination, you didn't do all that hocus pocus stuff, you know. It was deliverance and all of that, and he just accepted it, but you wouldn't be able to have a conversation about it or anything. Okay. Yeah.
So his behavior at home is really narcissistic, abusive, and that happens. And then in 2008, something comes out. Do you want to kind of tell us the story around that?
His behavior became intolerable. So something kind of shifted to the point that you couldn't just be a frog in a pot anymore. This is exploding, and I just couldn't stay in that pot anymore. And it was a long year, but at the end of it, he confessed. He made a full confession. And my girlfriend said to me, she called it a severe mercy, which is interesting, because in these situations, the woman gets dragged back to apologise and support the marriage, or the woman is gaslit and can't recognise everything that's happened, or only half-truths come out. But for me, he admitted to the whole truth. And my girlfriend said to me, Kate, no one has to put up with that, no one. I'm in my Christian mindset of forgiveness and, we'll get over this, we'll do this. And my girlfriend said no. So he admitted to taking advantage of women from the first year of our marriage in every pastorate he was at. So it's pretty extensive.
How long were you married at that point?
23 years.
Wow. Was he drug into it reluctantly, or did he finally just offer it up?
The thing that shifted was the last woman he chose was not a true victim. She was outside of the church, and it meant that she ramped up his expectations. So he had an expectation of he could have his cake and eat it too. He could keep his ministry and have this new relationship. But it meant he was super angry. And so I just had to start looking. But I only know what I know. So I just had to start looking at things, and I would go to the level of authority in the church. So I began by going to a couple of the guys who were leading men's ministry, and then I would go to the warden for accountability, and then I went to an assistant regional bishop for accountability, until finally I had to go to the special department that deals with this in our denomination for accountability. But every step of the way, he's just fudging and only admitting to what he knows and saying, it's just an emotional affair. And then the next 2 weeks later, there's 2 emotional affairs. And then finally, the children went at him hammer and tongs, actually, and said, what, in another 2 weeks, are you just going to say one more thing? If you're going to tell us this, why don't you just tell us everything? What's the point? So they were very angry, and they really went after him. And he just said, no, that's all there is. And I just knew there were more. I didn't know how many. I said, they want the truth. And I left the room. And, there was one of the wardens was by his side and just kept asking. Once he said, yes, there were more, one of the wardens was by his side and just kept asking.
Now, what is a warden?
A warden in the denomination, it's like a deacon.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the church leaders. Now, was the church? You said you had to just keep going, up the ladder until finally someone listened. Were they not believing you, or were they not caring?
He is charming and practice at obfuscating and misdirecting their gaze. So we had one intervention meeting with, 5 or 6 guys, and he just counted all their things, and they just accepted it. They didn't know how to hold the line and stay with the line. They took his bait and got deflected. And after that, I couldn't even go home. I just took the kids and stayed at my mum's. I was awful because he kept pulling the wool over their eyes, and they were happy to accept his glib answers.
And you were the only woman in the room when you're trying to work things out. 5 men, your husband, and you're the only woman. What kind of dynamic did that create for you, being the only woman in the room, being the victim of the room? There's probably not going to be much sympathy in the room, or even a desire to. The sympathies are going to lean towards your husband at that point.
Well, what you find is the whole story. It's a never-ending story of, at every level, minimal responses where they go, well, we've done this. Like the whole, the after pastor would come with a whole strategy. Like once the truth came out and the congregation had to know, and they go, well, we're doing this. And I'm like, this is nothing. I went on the internet. I've got 12-point plan, comprehensive congregational recovery plan that they should be doing, and they haven't even got to point 3. And they're patting themselves on the back that they've done points 1 and 2. And I'm like, well, there's 12 points that you should be doing. And it was like this the whole way through. And the Lord was good because he would give me information, and, I'm a Google detective now, but just the right information at the right time. But in the end, I'm feeding all these congregational recovery plans to the people who are chartered with the recovery across the denomination. A few years later they improved it, but I'm like that everywhere. I'm the one that goes, do you know what just happened in that meeting? Let me show you. He did this tactic. When you said that, he did this. When you said that, he did this.
So you have like this gift of seeing, a gift of leadership, and you are in a patriarchal complementarian setting that won't see it and recognize it. And yet you're still helping the congregation as much as you can. Were they able to receive that help, or did you have to walk away?
It's interesting because I'm like a walking wounded. I think the best term I've got is shell shock. Mm-hmm. So I'm a primary victim in all this, but I'm the one going around being the pastor's wife to the whole congregation. How are you coping? Let me help you understand this, I'm giving, the wisdom that the elders should have. I'm training them to see and recognise what's in front of their eyes. I know the first time when I put out a white flag, there were 2 guys who were leading men's ministry, and I said to one of them, I said to my husband, I will no longer keep your secrets. The next time you do something like that, someone else will know. That was it. That was it. I wasn't planning huge amounts of retribution. I just said, I will no longer keep your secrets, because I'd read that secrecy is its own power. It thrives in secrecy. So I rang up one of the guys. I said, when I tell you something's happened, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not asking you to, I just want you to know, and I just want him to know that you know. And that was his first shocking wake-up call. A year later he said, wow, it took me a couple of weeks to go, who do I believe? What do I do with this? Because you've got the image of the pastor versus the pastor's wife going, things aren't right. And basically he said to himself, well, there's a risk if I believe him and I'm fat out wrong, but there's a risk if I believe her and I'm wrong. He said, so he took a risk and he decided to believe me.
Wow. I'm really impressed with the level of leadership you're able to exercise from even a non-recognized position. I think if they could have had the freedom of you being in a better role of leadership, they could have been better. But at the same time, you said that you are the victim of this thing, and here you are trying to lead a congregation and your family through it. How are you taking care of your own soul through this process?
No. It's emergency. That's not on the table, know. Mm-hmm. There's been a crisis or a train crash. Everyone's in survival mode, and I've got the fluoro jacket on, and I'm helping the congregation because half the congregation are angry, and one answers. The other half of the congregation go, "Oh well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we can forgive and move on." And I was like, what's truth and grace in the middle of that? And I've got my children who are reeling, and I'm even helping the victims, which are a couple of the women who were his targets. I'm even helping them. I'm helping the leadership, the bishops, and the organisation that's meant to look after it, I'm giving them education around it. So, no, nobody's looking after me, and I'm not asking for it, and I don't even know that I need it. So I got a message from two of these women, and their husbands and their children are in my friendship group. And the children play together. And I got a message from one of them saying, would you like to meet? And I sent a message back to my girlfriend, who sent it to her husband, who sent it to her husband, who sent it back to her, and the message said, yes, but give me time to think about it. And afterwards she said she was shocked to even get a yes, because she was fully expecting me to never want to speak to her again. But I had a beautiful psychologist in the congregation who understood these matters, and together we worked out a time and place at her house. And this woman came with a husband and the psychologist friend and myself and a mutual friend who had been walking the journey a little way. And I was just trying to work out, what do we do? And my psychologist friend said, let's just see what she comes with, because that will be true and authentic. And she came into the room and she sat on the edge of the lounge, like crumpled and hunched and teary. And my friend opened up the gathering and invited her to speak, and she said, I'm so sorry. And I said, could you tell me what you're sorry for? And she said, oh, I'm sorry. I've taken from you and I've taken from your children, and I'm sorry for believing the lies. And she talked for quite a bit about her story and how could I say something, because then if I said something, it would be my fault that the clergy marriage, got broken. And so once she'd finished, I said to her, this is what I heard you say is, you're sorry took from me, sorry for taking from my children, and sorry for believing the lies. Would you like to just repeat that, because I'd like to respond? And she said yes. And she leaned over and grabbed my paper where I'd been taking notes, and she read it out. And she really spoke the words, I'm sorry for taking from you and taking from you and for believing these lies. And she cried. And I thought, oh, and I'm racking my brains, what do I do? In prayer ministry, they offer God's forgiveness, or my forgiveness. I thought, I should do mine first. So I said, and I forgive you. And we stood up and we hugged for quite a while. And when she's ready, she sat down. And I said, thank you so much for your words. Oh, I said, your words given me dignity. It gives my pain dignity. It gives my story dignity. But you have stepped into dignity by accepting those actions and asking for forgiveness and repenting of those. And I said, now, could I ask you, would you mind saying them again? Because the other thing is you've sinned not just against me, but against God. And would you mind saying those to God? And at this point, there was this little gasp from our mutual friend who's sitting to the side. And she's a very quietly spoken young woman. And she went, oh! and in that, she was like, it was her protest of, are you still going? Are you still asking her? Haven't you asked enough? Can't you let her alone? Do we have to keep doing this? All in that one gasp. But the lady herself said yes, and again reached for that piece of paper and again said to God, God, I have sinned against you. I've taken from you and I've believed the lies and I'm sorry. And I said, God forgives you, and a prayer to bless them and bless their marriage. And so on. Now, all of that took about 3 hours, and my little garbage bin beside me was full of tissues. And at the end of that, we poured another cup of tea and had some more chockies and chatted. And after that, the next morning was church, and there was a knock at the door, and my daughter said, Mum, someone's left something at the doorstep, and there was a bunch of flowers. And she told me later that she'd woken up and said, I've got to send her flowers, and asked her daughter to come with her and pick flowers that were my colours. And she'd written a little card that said, I've never been offered so much dignity apart from my husband, and the dignity of being walked through that process together with you. And after church, I sat with her in church, at the end of church, and we had a chat. Yeah, so that's the story.
Wow.
Of that. The beauty of it is that, in the weeks to come, I could pop around for pizza. The most beautiful thing was that following week, I told that story to each of my children separately when I could meet them, because they're very confused and they don't know what to do, and they don't know whether to be angry or to be sad or to be forgiving, and they don't know how to treat their friends. So I told them that story basically because I said, Satan doesn't have the last word. God, Jesus, and his ministry of reconciliation, that's the last word. And that changed things for my children. I think it gave them a new way to hold on to their faith. And it meant their children could come and visit and play again. So that was beautiful.
Yeah, the leadership it takes to walk somebody through that while you're the one who's wounded is, I'm just in awe. I don't know what to do next.
That brings me to your question.
Yes.
Because it is good, and because you always look around and it's not done well. People stay angry, or people forgive with too easy forgiveness. And just walking through that path is a gentle invitation, and she just goes, yes, I want to do this. And on the other side of that, we've got a new reconciled relationship based on truth and grace, not on denial and lies and easy forgiveness. Mm-hmm. But your question was, what I didn't understand is, because I am also the victim, I am in that role not in a place of strength. I am ministering out of my woundedness, and the following year I would go back for prayer ministry. Because what I didn't realise is now I have a double wound where I am giving out of an empty tank kind of thing. It took a while because there was another woman, and basically one of the prayer ministers said to me, okay, Kate, that's enough now. You don't have to keep doing that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a boundary. See, what I don't know, I know how to be endlessly in the role of teacher, forgiveness, patience, long-suffering, endlessly. But I don't know self-care, and I don't know boundaries.
Was there a time in the near future of that moment where you learned it, or did you have to go through more wounding before you learned?
Oh, it's such a long journey out. So many shades. One thing was confusing is that when you're in ministry, you have nearly 100% of your life is this world. Your support network's there, your friends are there, the schools are there, everything's in this one community. And it's like, well, how can I leave the community, the church? I haven't done the wrong thing. Why can't I still hang around and, have that stability? But I would only get 2 responses. One was, why are you still here? Which felt like a huge rejection.
Wow. Just
to make them more comfortable. And the other was me saying I could stay, I suppose. But what nobody could do, and it's called collateral damage. Everyone's getting ministered to. The ex-pastor has someone talking to him. The victims have someone talking to them. The congregation has someone talking to them and ministering for them. But I've got no category. There's no one allocated for me. And what I needed was a compassionate voice that would say to me, Kate, it's time to step back. It's time to step back. And around that is a post that's gone up recently. You cannot heal in the same place that you've been wounded. But I didn't get step back. I got, why don't you go, which was not a compassionate response. Nowhere I turned was a compassionate response. It was, you're inconvenient, and your presence is an inconvenient truth that we want to paper over.
Yeah. Your very existence is proof that their isolated, insulated world had so much falseness to it.
Yeah.
And it's just easier to, put their hands on you and send you off in the wilderness as the scapegoat.
Whoa, yes, I think that's what they would have liked. Yes, and you bear the shame. He reappears in some professional life, but you're finding it hard to keep your employment going because you're dealing with all this PTSD and stuff.
Does that bring us to about 2009, 2008?
Yeah, so you wanted the focus to be on my healing journey. I could talk endlessly on the failings of the denomination, but your focus is my healing journey.
Yeah, where do you go from here? How do you recover from a wound so great?
Well, I could I could sign myself up to prayer ministry because I didn't need his signature anymore. They used to want you to get the signature of your pastor, which meant I could never go. But they had 4 double weekends, so that's 8 weekends, and that was the first thing in my diary. And I went to them all and did everything and learnt about, I don't know, what is it, the orphan spirit and... and the legal things, and I said yes to everything. And the following year, I was like, the first year you're experiencing it, and I went back the following year to learn how to be the prayer minister, because the first year you're experiencing it and you can't remember what you've done, but the second year you're like, I see what's happening now. Oh, I can see why we're using these scriptures now. And so when I went back the second year, a girlfriend came with me to support me. But what she doesn't know is she's going to be about to get knocked over on her first healing journey. When I was a man, I spoke like a man. No, when I was a child, I talked like a child. But when I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. But that doesn't happen overnight. But there's that first process where you crack the shell is an important process. And so she would come with me just to support me. But at the end of every day, I would drive her home again, and she was sleeping in the car because she just got walloped with these truths where she was living her life out of a wrong place rather than a healthy place, and learning to come back to health. Yeah, so that was my second year. And for everything I do, I'm like, right, I'm going to learn about this, and I'm going to be a prayer minister. And I can use this for the glory of God. But, yeah.
You mentioned cracking the shell. What does that process look like, and what does that do, accomplish? Tell us what that means.
Broken and contrite heart, Lord, you will not despise. A broken, see, it's in that place of humility, in that place of brokenness, that God begins his healing work. And we all got to do this journey. We've all got to go to therapy. We've all got to face our family of origin story. We've all got to look back on ourselves and go, what is it we're carrying? What is the coping mechanisms we're carrying? Because we're living out of a place that's really not quite centered on the Father heart of God. Yeah, and so for a brokenness can get you there, or the teaching, sometimes just bringing out the teaching helps you realize, oh, that's me. And it gets you to confront those areas that need cleaning out, and like a spring clean. To start a healthy journey. And those around you will sing the praises. Your spouse, your children will love the new you.
That sounds a lot like one of my friends, Dan White Jr., talks about, cracking the ego, and that you have to be broken open and not just skim over the top of the ego, but to crack yourself open. And I adopted a phrase because I had my ego utterly destroyed. But I had a phrase now that I like to say that, most Christians are just doing a good impersonation of who they wish they were. Yeah. And that's the ego at work. And until that is broken open, then you can just be the person that you are and just be better at being that human being that you are. And
Paul talks about that when he says, I do what I do not want to do. Who will save me from this wretched thing? So we have these two selves, the saved self that God is renewing, and the ego, or the old self that is stuck in the old patterns from whatever family of origin. And we have to reconcile that old one and bring in what we call gospeling the heart to renew the ego.
What does that phrase mean, gospeling the heart? You're taking a noun and making a verb out of it.
In my denomination, you could take scary words that divide and go, you got to cast out the demons and you got to do all this. And you're like, no, I would use gospel-friendly or Bible-friendly words. It doesn't have to sound, big. And gospeling the heart is what we do every Sunday. Every Sunday we say a repentance prayer. We are heartily sorry for all our misdoings. And then the minister will go, in the name of Christ, you are forgiven. And we do this every week. Well, gospeling the heart is just walking them through a prayer of repentance and praying a prayer of forgiveness. And another one is renouncing. Well, every baptism and every confirmation is I renounce the devil as all his ways and I accept Christ. So sometimes you've got to renounce old patterns and old beliefs and then take up new things. But I kind of use everyday language, like this is what we do every baptism or every confirmation. So gospeling the heart is going to those deep places of the ego and go, what are the false beliefs? Is your identity in Christ or is your identity in performance? What is your false beliefs? The Father heart of God or a vengeful God? And you've got to renounce the old beliefs and accept the new beliefs. When you read those, identity in Christ things, for each person, one or two will jump off the page and you'll go, they're my two. That's my sticking point. That's the one I want to hold on to and I don't want to renounce. But that's the thing that trips you over. So gospeling the heart is a process of gentle invitation around all these things. Renouncing beliefs, forgiving those you have to forgive, repenting of, conscious sins, unconscious, legal sins, illegal sins. Oh, there's socially sanctioned sins, like the gift of being helpful, being overly helpful. Well, nobody's going to, complain about your overly helpfulness, except your children back home or something, but you have to repent of those. So all of that is called gospeling the heart.
You've said a phrase a couple of times in our conversation today that's really, it's like a spotlight keeps going on to that one. And you had an abusive husband in a patriarchal, complementarian, men-centered church. And there's so much of this wounding that's around that toxic, masculine, versions of maleness. And yet you are talking about the fathering heart of God as being a source of healing for you. And I think to be able to embrace that picture of who God is while you have had that masculine wounding and abuse, I think is just very beautiful and courageous. You want to maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So one thing they warn you about after your very first, prayer retreat is the enemy will come and attack you, and often in waves of 3, and you've got to be prepared for an attack of the enemy. And so everything I do is very hard won because I get an attack of the enemy. So one of these beautiful teachings of the Father Heart of God is they'll have the men that they've trained and are, already safe stand around the room, and you can choose who you want to approach just to have a father hug. And that's very nice. I'd be very ginger about that. Father Heart of God. Yeah, I tell you who I love. Like Ken Symington's got this beautiful, gentle Irish voice, and he's got a very gentle, and they take you along a journey in very gentle ways because they know that you are highly alert and highly anxious around that. And the other beautiful speaker that I would listen to is Graham Cook. He's amazing. He was coming to Australia and I couldn't get a ticket, so I just went on every YouTube video and every podcast I could find of his and get his free things. And he's got this beautiful, gentle way of talking, and everything he speaks on is about the building up your heart. I've come from a denomination that shames and blames and limits and white ants the women, but these teachings build in strength from these beautiful men. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there's so much, at least in America, there is like a movement of Christian masculinity where it's really not masculinity, it's just more of like machoism with a facade on it of masculinity. And you keep using this phrase of gentleness, and one of my heroes is coming to mind of Mr. Rogers. And
oh, yes, like beautiful.
The strength of Mr. Rogers is very underrated.
Yes, because it's rare. It shouldn't be, but it's because it's uncommon.
Yeah, but I think that men are just afraid to be gentle because it might be perceived as weakness. And you're giving us a picture of strength. But then you're getting into the
whole masculinity thing, which is basically as soon as a man defines themselves as non-feminine, they're already stuck in patriarchy. And after the fall, and your true masculinity is before the fall and in Christ. So you're fully feminine, fully masculine as you look to Christ. And then you feel your masculinity most in the presence of a woman, and you feel your femininity most in the presence of a man. But if you define yourself against women, you are hamstrung. Yeah.
Where else did your healing journey take you? I mean, you've listed some things like dance and song, and grounding.
Oh, dancing. See, I think I have so much femininity in me that is not being met. And his whole apparatus was to sabotage. So while I was still married, I did belly dancing. And so I could, express and dance through all that femininity energy there. But as soon as the marriage was over, I was like, right, let me go Latin dancing, let me go, Somatic dancing, let me go Argentine tango. I did all the partner dancing, and it was joyous. So the rules of the dance floor, through the rules and the etiquette of the dance floor, you could have a healthy connection between masculine and feminine. And it was glorious. I would just laugh the whole way through. It was very healing for me. So dance was part of it. My favourite dances, though, I did do ballroom, but ballroom is choreographed. It's not. Whereas Somatic, and Argentine tango is free form. And so through the connection of one finger, a whole dance can unfold. And it's that beautiful interaction that was very nurturing to my soul.
You mentioned also grounding.
Yes.
Is that describe a practice of grounding?
Well, I had to go. My sister kept inviting me to, I call it hippie camping, and 100 people would go to the bush and be vegetarian and leave no footprint, and I do yoga and so on. But one of the things they valued there was the value of a hug. And so people would come from year to year, and it'd be this welcome home hug. And you'd see people arrive and get embraced. And these weren't the, 5, 10, 20-second hugs that we're used to seeing. People would be held in these hugs for a minute or 2 minutes, And it was beautiful, but they understood the value of these hugs, and they'd even have a hugs workshop. And now I give the hugs workshops, which are wonderful. And so it was a place, and they had a whole thing around consent was a big thing. So while there might be some wild things going on, there was also the idea that your no is respected. And so I could approach and receive hugs from guys without it having to be wrapped up in, oh, so you want to go to bed, or, oh, so you want to marry me, without it being sexualized. And so it was a very beautiful place where I could get hugs. I think the first time I went there, I said to my sister, I don't know about you, but I keep meeting the guys that are a bit, weird. And so the word would go around. And I think some of the good guys, I don't know, anyway, one of the guys came up, and all he did was stand beside me. And all he did was offer his shoulder up against my shoulder. And you've got to remember, this is only 2 years after, or 1 year after. He offered his shoulder against my shoulder so I could lean on it. And I just melted and dissolved into tears. And he just went with me as we melted down and sat on the floor, just shoulder to shoulder, side by side. And it was the only level of touch I could probably tolerate, but it was huge. And in the end, we were just sitting there in the tent space, and he let me lean against his back. And all of a sudden, I'm back to my strong, animated self, chatting with everyone. He's got a chatting circle on the other side, but he's offering me the strength of his back in contact. That's the beginning of just, there, they were my baby steps. So, sorry. Yeah, it just makes me realise there's so much trauma, you know. I could only do side hugs. And then I was just like, you know, don't touch my hands, don't touch my face, any neck up, that's too personal, but just give me this big hug and don't let me go. That was my kind of trauma. Another opportunity for grounding was you'd get massages, which was fine, but one guy offered a pressure point massage, a Thai massage. You know, it's called pressure point massage, and, you know, you're used to having your muscles all kneaded. But this was very unusual in that it finished what I thought was rather quickly, and it was just these pressure points. Anyway, he finished and then just walked away and left me there, and I was like, is that it? And after a while I got up and I took my sarong and I went over to a quiet corner and I sat down amongst the cushions and I wept and wept and wept. This trauma is stored in the body and you just don't even know it's there. Yeah.
Trauma is stored in the body.
And you don't even know.
Yeah, because your brain can't reach it to be conscious of it.
Yeah.
And it's your nervous system instead just does what it does without permission from the brain.
I tell you something, I had a grandchild that was very challenging and difficult, was born. And I remember my sister being kind of similar when she was a little baby. And so I tell my daughter some of these things to do for my grandchild. And so I'm learning about massage and the benefits of massage. So my big thing is to, you know, give my little grandchildren beautiful massages after their baths, which is what I would do for my children. I think I forgot for the first one, but by the next ones came around, you know, I'd give them lovely little body massages.
Yeah.
But this little one, this new little baby, the others would like, do you want a massage? Sometimes they'd say yes, sometimes no, but this little one would have it every time. Do you want your back or your tummy? So always giving them the choices they need. But she would drink it in and it would soothe her. She loved it. And so I'm watching in her how it makes a difference to her little body at the same time as I'm learning it about me and my body. Yeah.
Well, there's one more thing on your list, I believe. Another source of healing. And there was song, sound, and puppies. And I was wondering if you'd like to talk about that.
Oh, yeah, the sound was interesting, and singing. Oh, I know when we graduated with the counselling degree, somatic healing was the new modality that's come around. And so they had this beautiful graduation ceremony, but later in the ceremony, the singers stood in a circle around the 2 or 3 rows of graduates, and they stood around us and sang us a beautiful, beautiful hymn of some sort. And I was just in tears. To be enveloped by these voices washing over you was very beautiful. Oh, puppies were my next project. I'm like, it's hard being on your own. You're built for partnership, but you're trying to navigate your own healing. I'm like, okay, I'll get a puppy. I'll make it a project, and I'll train it up to be a therapy puppy. It'll be my project. So I get this little puppy. And I've learned about attachment theory, so I know it in my head. and so on. But what I don't know is living and walking the experience of this little puppy and the attachment bond and how that kind of gave me grounding and gave me a sense of centering and kind of feel like there's always this yearning hole that you're just coping through life. But holding this little puppy was kind of feeding that attachment need. So that was very interesting to realize how that stabilizes you on an attachment level. The other thing is just holding it at the end of the day, so you've got someone to hug you and still your nervous system. But I started the puppy dog training, but I think I've only got halfway through it. But puppies have been amazing. And the final thing is the environment. We've just had the Alone series. You've had Alone in America. We had Alone in Australia, and a woman won it called Gigi. She won it, and you should watch it. But she has this at one. So her spirituality is interlinked with her connection to nature and environment. And so I'm finding a lot of healing by, sitting in the sun or walking barefoot or gardening and, breathing in the fresh air in the morning is connecting my body to nature, which is a spiritual practice of its own.
The thing that I've learned from our conversation today is that you can't think your way into a healed place. You have to live yourself into a healed place.
Yes.
And involve the body and community and environment and puppies and dancing and all of these bodily activities. Those are the things, as you said, trauma is stored in the body. And so you have to do things with your body to get them out.
Yeah.
And that is just, that's really how I'm like summarizing what I've learned here from, there's many more things because your story is so beautifully powerful. But that's one that is really sticking out to me right now.
Yes, and only you can navigate your own healing. So I keep looking for somebody to tell me the right way to go. No, you've got to start to listen to your body and integrate. The integrity is integrating your heart, soul, and body. And if you listen to your body, you will know the next step, because only you can navigate your journey, you and the Lord, and you'll bring in little wisdom pieces along the way, and God will send you little wisdom partners along the way, but the journey is yours. To give up looking for, a male pastor to guide you has been one of the last things I've had to let go of, in my deconstruction. Yeah. Honor that journey.
Okay, I really have enjoyed this conversation. It's been a long time
Thank you so much, Tom, for the privilege of sharing my story and for bearing witness to my story. It's very precious. Thank you.
It was definitely beautiful. I'm going to be processing this one for a little while. So, gosh, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, thank you so much for listening to the Liminal Living podcast. As you know, we here are sharing stories and practices and perspectives for those who are in dark nights or deconstruction processes, and you just don't know where you fit any longer. Well, you still do fit somewhere because you're human and you're you. And I hope that Kate's story was able to inform your story. And that you will find some path for healing and reconciliation forward. And I hope that this blessed you today. And we have another wonderful podcast planned for next week, so I will see you then. And I appreciate so much you giving me an hour or so of your time, and blessings and peace to you.